taking office in 2008, he created a division of sustainability and the environment. He's improved building development standards to support solar energy and urban agriculture. He more than doubled our bike lanes, and that's still expanding. Begun work on a $1.8 billion airport reconstruction project that has some of the most ambitious energy efficiency goals ever established for a project of its kind in the United States. He performed energy audits and implemented energy efficiencies on our city buildings. Launched the Mayor's Skyline Challenge, a program created to help address and reduce energy use in large commercial buildings. Launched the Green City Growers Community Garden Program to identify underutilized city properties that can be converted into new community garden spaces. And numerous clean air initiatives. On behalf of the Utah chapter of the USCBC, I'm honored to present Mayor Ralph Becker with the Craig Forster Lifetime Achievement Award.
Thank you, Alan and Dan. What a wonderful honor. For those of us who are in this field, and I consider myself in the field, there's probably nothing more rewarding than being recognized for accomplishing the changes in our community, in our buildings, and in our overall environment that will lead to a sustainable lifestyle, hopefully far into the future. And to be recognized for this award in recognition of Greg Forster, who really did remarkable things at the university. And as having a son who worked with him, and I know helped launch his career in environmental studies, now helping with the bike share program in Salt Lake City, I know what an influence he had on so many people. And then to follow in the footsteps of Ivan Weber, who I have known as a neighbor and as a friend, and he is a true Renaissance man. I mean, more than about anybody I've ever known. And Greg Montague, who was also a teacher of my son up at the U, and I think inspired him to follow the career that he has now in the environmental and planning arena is an enormous honor, and I'm so glad to be able to share it with them. I'm going to spend a little time talking about, for me personally, why this is such an important arena that we work in, and then some of the things that Alan referenced that we're doing in the city, and how we try to look at the city from the perspective of environmental. Thank you. I'm glad I've got technological help here. In our environmental and sustainability work in the city, and many of you are familiar with it, but I just want to give a quick sort of summary and cast over a lot of the things we're trying to do. And then talk as well about sort of the picture nationally that I've been involved in a bit, and what we see, I think, as the future in front of us. I grew up in the wilds of Washington, D.C., but fortunately for me, had really the fortune of having Rock Creek not too far from where I grew up, and so like all kids seeking to get away and find their own worlds, we would go and hang out and get in trouble in Rock Creek Park, where we couldn't get in too much trouble, other than drinking the water, which I'm glad I've survived. But that in a way was an initial introduction for me that I never even understood at the time. And then I had the fortune when I was a senior in high school to go through an Outward Bound program, and any of you have had that sort of an opportunity to know what that does in terms of not only acquainting us to the wild world around us, but also giving us the competence and the confidence to exist in it comfortably, and to enjoy it in all of its manifestations. Then I had the opportunity for several years to work for the National Park Service down at the Grand Canyon. That got me out here. And I've never really turned back from that, having lived here now for 40 years. And I thought I was going to make a career in the National Park Service. It's, I thought, God, what a good deal. You work and live in national parks. You can't get much better than that. I went through what I thought would be sort of the best training I could have by pursuing environmental law and planning through graduate degrees. But then life takes turns, as all of us know who think we're going to follow a career path. Very seldom does it follow the sort of idea we initially have, and I've been sort of just bouncing around from job to job ever since, with great fortuity. With great fortune, not financially, but in terms of rewards, certainly to me, and the satisfaction we all get from doing things, I think, to help in our communities. I've also been able to see my own two sons kind of go through the experience of the kind of awakening we get when we spend time in the outdoors. And it's certainly leading for me in this job to not only have a particular interest and motivation for addressing and trying to provide opportunities for people to get outdoors and to protect the resources that we have so that people can continue to enjoy the outdoors, but also to experience, I think, the amazing beauty that only the natural world, for me, sort of launches me into another dimension. And in fact, one of my very favorite quotes that I had not seen, even though I've read a lot about Teddy Roosevelt for a long time, where he said the most practical greatness that can be achieved is to protect beauty. And those terms don't often come together, but they certainly struck me as something that is important. And I think that's true for all of us who are working in this arena of sustainability. Because whether we look at it personally or whether we look at it professionally or vocationally or avocationally, addressing the environment that provides for us and sustains us is ultimately what's going to allow us to succeed and to have the kind of quality of life that so many of us enjoy today going forward. So whether we're talking about clean air, which has emerged as the most pressing issue among the public in our state, I mean, far and away, and who would have thought that 10 or 15 years ago? But it certainly is today. I was even looking at some information this morning that Envision Utah is putting together, and it's like jumped head over heels ahead of usually the number one issues of education and safety and security in our communities. So we're seeing that emerge, and I actually see that as a great opportunity. The number one issue, interestingly though, for people sort of thematically is water, which is, again, when we look at our resources and where we live, has got to be the key to our future. And of course, the land and the landscapes that we live on and live within is the foundation for everything that we do. So in Salt Lake, we really have been forming the work we have done during my now almost 7 years at this job around what we call the livability agenda. And while I know here, and I'll spend a fair amount of time talking about this today, we focus on our built environment and our buildings. If we think about sustainability, and if we think about the quality of our communities and the world that we live in our communities, it needs to be a comprehensive consideration. And so while we have framed everything in terms of livability, which I think is almost going to be interplayed with the term sustainability, we also need to think about prosperity. We need to think about our mobility and transportation systems. We need to think about, obviously, how we use energy and the environment that we coexist in. We need to think about education. Because if we don't have kids that have equal opportunities for the educational enrichment that probably everybody in this room has received, and where we have the changing demographics in this city that is increasingly so around the state, we're not going to be giving our kids the opportunities. It also means having a community and an environment that provides for equal opportunity, so that every person is treated with respect and included in our community and welcomed in our community, and has the opportunity to be successful in our community and hopefully contribute back as well. And then we do live in a city, and in a city where arts and culture has this enormous tradition, where we have wonderful venues for all kinds of performing arts and digital and film media, and we could go on in terms of the great opportunities. So having those experiences and having them particularly centrally located in a downtown area that serves as a core for our cultural opportunities is also important if we're going to truly have livability. In Salt Lake, as I said, we have really tried to frame what we do around these concepts and around livability, and then to try to have the discipline to look at how we are doing. So we have set very specific objectives, and we have some folks here from our sustainability division who do all the hard work and really guide us as a city. But I invite any of you to go to the dashboard we have set up for our Sustainable Salt Lake 2015 plan that outlines for, I can't remember, it's about 80 specific metrics we've identified across the livability agenda for what our goals are, how we are measuring those, and where we are in pursuit of those goals. So that's everything from achieving 50% by 2015, diverting materials from our landfill through reuse and recycling with the ultimate goal of completely eliminating the Salt Lake City contributions to the landfill, to net zero, to open space and recreation, and I could go across the board, but they are all refined into measurable objectives that we can hold ourselves as city government accountable and have as well, so I really invite you to look at this online for this purpose, to have our public comment to have us. We have an online interactive feature to this website where people can both give us comments, give us ideas of ways we can improve what we're doing, and invite any and all of you to participate with us on that dashboard. So that's everything from air quality and energy and recycling and transportation, open space, urban forestry, water resources, arts and culture, community health and safety, housing, food production and nutrition and education. It covers, as I said, kind of the full range of goals that we've set for ourselves as a city. So we obviously live in such a remarkable place, and as I wander around the country, I like to remind all of my fellow local government officials that for a city, we live in the most beautiful setting and place in the country, with the greatest access to the outdoors in the country. And while we're all trying, we all are in this healthy competition, as I call it, for things that we're doing around the general sort of green initiative moniker, Salt Lake City has a starting point that very few places can boast. And whether we talk about this in terms of addressing the needs with the changing climate, whether we talk about it in terms of air quality, which is pressing upon us and has gained our attention so much, or whether we talk about it in terms of water or any of the other features that go into livable community, climate change, in my mind, is not an issue or a term that we should shy away from. It's a term we should embrace. It's not an issue that should be ever considered in ideological terms. It should be considered for the practical needs that we have to adapt to a changing world. And it scares me, I've got to say, when I see this topic being handled and treated in a way as though it's somebody's dream out there. As a member of the President's Climate Change Task Force, where we have 8 governors, 16 mayors, several county commissioners, and several tribal leaders, around the table from every corner and side and interior part of this country. And we talk about what is happening in our local environments today from climate change. It is not some theoretical construct. We have been very fortunate not to have faced some of the disasters that other parts of this country have faced, whether you look at it in terms of intensity of storms or drought. But we are seeing the changes. And in Salt Lake City, the area that I like to point to the most is really in our water supply. We are seeing today changes in our snowpack that is requiring us to look at how we change our infrastructure to provide for the water quantity and quality to more than half of the population of this valley we provide for today, because of changes we're already seeing, changes we're trying to understand as well as possible that are coming, and how we provide the infrastructure to continue to provide water today, which is an incredibly high quality resource. And without enormous expense, we need to be planning for and actually starting to institute the infrastructure changes today. We've relied on snowpack, and we've relied on dams to provide us storage in those drier, longer months at the end of summer and beginning of fall. We no longer can rely at all on the lower elevation snowpacks. And our snowpack up high is changing, both in composition and in amounts, in a way that requires us to look at how we deal with less snow going forward. And it's obviously both very much a real issue today for us in terms of water supply, but it's also an economic issue when we look at the ski areas. And I can tell you, the ski areas and that association is focused like a laser on what's happening with climate change, because there are ski areas today that won't be there 20 years from now. And that includes in Utah. So we're undergoing changes, and those changes in a way provide us an opportunity to not only maintain but maybe enhance the quality of life we have today if we act intelligently. So in Salt Lake City, as Alan mentioned, we're doing a whole variety of things, I think, to look at our built environment, and I want to probably just focus on that because that's of greatest interest to us here today. One of the efforts is we're one of 10 cities chosen nationally to work with commercial buildings, larger buildings, on how they can improve and reduce their energy use over time. We've had a great grant and a lot of national capacity that's come forward. We've got some wonderful partners, both with the utilities and with the large building owners, to institute a series to identify the most successful changes that can be made, the most cost-effective changes that can be made, and to put those in place, providing help on the business side of what we do. We've obviously done, as you all, I think, are fully aware, and some of you participated on, looking around the room, in the public safety building in the next block to the east. It is the first net zero public safety building in the country, and at least at the time it was built, it was the largest net zero building in the country. And when we started on it, we had a budget that was identified through a bond election of our voters. It was not a net zero building from its inception. We made that a goal. And for the same budget, as was initially contemplated, we were able to develop a net zero building. And all of you in this room know better than I do the both technical and intricate work that needs to go into making that happen. Yeah, thank you. I think I saw Clark as I was coming in here. Is he back? That's the guy right there. People kept saying no, and Clark would go, no, wait a minute, we can figure this out, you know. And what we ended up doing was they said, well, can we look off-site? And I said, I don't care how we get to net zero. What important thing is to get there. We found a landfill off-site that we couldn't use for development, but we could start using the surface of it. It was right next to a major transmission line, and we started Salt Lake City's first solar farm, which is growing. We hope to now include the new Performing Arts Center downtown. It is our goal to achieve that. We're getting some really good energy efficiencies, and any of you are here who want to make contributions to help us get the funding to put up the rest of the renewable power we need to make that a net zero building as well, we would welcome it. So this has multiple benefits, obviously, for downtown Salt Lake, and we're looking forward to its opening in mid-2016. We are also, with the airport reconstruction, as Alan mentioned, we have set net zero as our goal there, and any of you who have worked with airports and airlines and the FAA know that they're not always very welcoming of new ideas that are outside of their realm. But you know what? We are absolutely determined to get this airport to net zero. Last week, I had the great fortune of taking a week off, and I was up in northern Minnesota, and went up over the border into Canada. And you know, you talk about both a harsh environment and one where you wouldn't expect to see a lot of solar. I was driving by the airport in a city called Thunder Bay, and all along the runways were solar panels. And I thought, you know, if they can do it there, why can't we do it here? And so we're working through it. Would appreciate all of your help. Those of you who have good friends with the CEO of Delta Airlines or good connections into the FAA, you know, we'll appreciate your help in getting us there. But we have the land, and we certainly have the capability in a $1.8 billion project to be able to find the resources to do this. So we're committed to it, and hopefully we will see that happen quickly. Obviously, the other part, when we talk about carbon emissions, buildings are number one. Number two is transportation, and they're not that far apart, really. But so providing for a great transportation system and giving people the full range of options. Our motto under the mobility theme of our livability agenda is drive if you must or want to, but let's not make that the best option for the way to get around. And that means change, and change doesn't come easily. Some of you may have noticed in the political arena or otherwise. And we are, of course, in the process. We opened up a return to streetcars in Salt Lake. Many of you may know in Salt Lake, we at one time had 140 miles of streetcar in Salt Lake City that, like most of the rest of the country, got all ripped out in the 1950s. We've got neighborhoods built around the streetcar. And we are returning as quickly and well as we can to streetcars. We were very fortunate to get a federal Tiger grant, as they're called, competitively issued grants from the U.S. Department of Transportation to help us build the first streetcar line, which is in Sugar House, as probably all of you know, and opened in December of last year. And we are now working on extending it as quickly as we can to the Sugar House Monument. And then hopefully in the not too distant future going north to 17 South and serving Westminster in that neighborhood. We're also working on a downtown streetcar line going east-west from downtown up to the university, and that is in its long study, analysis, community involvement phase. But we hope we are within a couple of years, pending financing, which is always seems to be the biggest challenge, to being able to start on another streetcar line there. We're working as well on a BRT. It started out as a streetcar line going north into South Davis County, into Bountiful and Centerville as well. So we're committed to streetcars. We think they are a wonderful addition and mode of transportation that both helps with neighborhoods and communities in connecting us, but also in giving people other ways to get around. We have also, as all of you know here, been successful in large part thanks to the incredible entrepreneurial spirit of the Utah Transit Authority, to having the largest urban rail development in the last 15 years in this country, with commuter rail and light rail and now streetcar. And they have a lot to do, and they get banged up pretty heavily, and I'm not going to say it isn't sometimes deserving, but they are the key and have been to a transit future. And we can question certainly some of the things about UTA and that have happened there, but I can tell you from wandering around the country and being part of some of the circles where transit is talked about in transportation, they are viewed as the model nationally by funders as well as by their peers as being the best transit agency in the country. They completed the 5 transit lines that they just finished, rail lines, a year ahead of schedule and $60 million under budget, which got turned back to the federal government. And you know, that kind of thing doesn't happen. All of us who've been involved in big projects very often, but it's a testament to how well their management and development of these systems is. And they are a real key to our future. Green bikes, there are very few things as a politician that we do that get universally liked. This is the one for me. You know, people just say how much they like it, whether they use it or not, right? And that doesn't happen very often, but it's been a great success. We're in our 2nd year of operation. The first year we exceeded every other city in the country in use per capita. This year we've doubled the number of stations and more than doubled the bikes, and we've more than doubled the ridership. And we see that just continuing on, not just in Salt Lake City, but in a lot of the other communities that are interested. They're fun. Those of you who haven't used it, it is so easy. I mean, I bike to work, but when I'm going around downtown, I don't use my bike. I just grab a green bike because it's easier and maybe safer for my bike than using my own bike. Anyway, it's been a great success. We're putting in, as all of you have seen probably, if you've been around here, but our protected bikeways, they used to be called cycle tracks, in downtown on 300 South between the Rio Grande Depot and ultimately going up to University. This year we're going up to 600 East. And it hasn't been without controversy, but we are confident it's not only going to work well, people need to make some adjustments in learning sort of how the street operates a little bit differently, but it will also allow so many more people to feel comfortable getting out on the road. So that's coming along well. And then, of course, this is the light rail line going out to the airport, and it shows how a complete street approach to our transportation system can transform a corridor in a positive way, unlike almost anything else. So here we've got light rail, we've got vehicular lanes, we've got on-street bike lanes, we've got an on-street shared path 10 foot wide for bikes and pedestrians, and all of the lighting and landscaping and the land use around the corridor has been completely overhauled, and we're starting to see the benefits of that. We have already over 1,000 units of new housing going in along North Temple, and the applications coming in continue to grow, and we expect will going forward. And it's helping transform a whole neighborhood that unrightfully is not viewed that positively, but those of you who haven't been around Rose Park or Glendale or Poplar Grove, I invite you. It is the most fun of any neighborhood in Salt Lake City. Those neighborhoods are. So it's great to see these kinds of changes taking place. And then any of you who live in Salt Lake City had an opportunity to get an annual UTA pass for a 70% reduction in cost. We have temporarily suspended that program. It has not met the financial goals that we set with UTA, but it's certainly we're really increasing ridership greatly, and it's really fun to see this happening. We're going to have to revamp the program a little bit before we go forward. So it really takes an entire approach, and I've just sort of touched on 2 of these from my vantage point in terms of things that we're doing in the city to try to do our part to contribute to a sustainable future. I just want to touch briefly as well what I started to talk about in terms of climate change. It is amazing when I sit down with the governor of Vermont, who when he came into office thought he had one job, and then after 2 500-year storm events in 3 years and watching the devastation on the infrastructure in Vermont, said, my world got turned upside down, and all of a sudden I was wondering what's going on here. And as he began to understand it, and it was explained to him by the people who understand the science of our climate and what is happening in the world, and he realized that he needed to completely change his framework for how he governed as the governor of the state of Vermont. Or whether you talk to a tribal leader in northern Alaska, which is north enough as it is, who talks about what's happened to their fishing villages, and to their fish and wildlife, and to the changing landscapes with the changes with the tundra, or whether you talk to someone who's from Southeast Florida, where this is not an ideological issue. All of the local government folks, Republican and Democrat, have come together to deal with rising sea levels, incursions into their water supply, protection of the basic infrastructure and the homes and businesses along their waterfronts that is only going to be increasing, they know, over time. We've been lucky here. You go to the other side of the mountains in Colorado, and it's not, for them, a theoretical issue there. The floods that they've had the last few years, which the intensity of could not be accounted for based on prior standard ways of looking at storm events, they are beginning to accept is the result of this changing climate. We've been, as I said, really lucky here. We have not had those kinds of events, but we're one of the very few places in the country that hasn't started to see the dramatic impacts of climate change, and we know we're just at the front end of those effects. So I've had this great opportunity, from my vantage point, to be part of this task force. And at our last meeting, President Obama was there, and he said he was getting all pumped up and excited, talking about how he was looking forward to all our recommendations and how he was going to carry them up. And his staff person, who's the head of intergovernmental relations and was co-chairing the task force, David Agnew, whispered in his ear, there are 500 recommendations coming out of this task force. And he went, yeah, and get them organized and prioritized, will you? And, but the commitment we're seeing nationally, and that I can tell you we see across the country locally, is what encourages me. At the local government level, we've had over 1,200 cities sign on to the Kyoto Protocols, and now we're launching a new set of goals and objectives among local governments to set a new threshold for us to really hasten the pace of what we do and how we do it, as we're understanding more the changes that are happening, the resilience we need, the adaptations we need to make. So that all has been organized for us. Fortunately, we're looking forward to a report coming out here in the next, I'd say, 6 weeks. Actually, a draft of it has been out for the folks involved in the task force, and we just sent in our comments. So we'll see how that comes along. But it really is encouraging for me to see that in the executive branch level, we know things can't happen in Congress that are just simple, normal, routine things, not to mention something like climate change. But in this administration, if any of you are really interested in this and want to see what's happening nationally, look at the June 2013 Climate Action Plan that President Obama issued, that is literally almost a listing of the things they are and will be doing as an administration to attempt to address as best they can this issue. Part of that has been this state, local, and tribal task force, where we have been working with the administration and providing advice on things that can happen short of congressional action to help us do our jobs locally. And it's around built systems, it's around community health and community development, it's around disaster recovery and resilience, and natural resources and agriculture. And we've all been working in our different groups there. So I've maybe spent too much time, but given you sort of a sense of both what motivates me and what the kinds of things as communities, from my world and vantage point, that we need to be doing if we're going to provide for the quality of life that makes Salt Lake and really makes all of Utah such a magnificent place to live. And I hope all of you will find ways to get involved. Both, obviously, you're involved in terms of your work around green buildings. But I can tell you, it's pretty tough out there in the political world in Utah. I know that may come as a surprise to you to be working on these issues. But for the sake of your careers, I want to really encourage you to contact your elected officials, to get involved with your community in different ways you can, to let them know what you think should happen. Most elected officials receive very little contact from their constituencies. I'm fortunate to say that I'm not one of those, and I really mean it that way. I mean, I may get beat up a lot, but that is part of what helps me learn and shape what we do and how we do it. But most elected officials don't get very much of that. I can tell you from having served in the legislature for 11 years, and I would talk to other legislators, they might hear from 5 or 10 constituents on a topic in the course of a legislative session that was a major topic. And so when someone weighs in, and I can tell you, as obtuse as it may seem, as they may seem to you, they do hear from and respond to public pressure when they hear it. We wouldn't have seen the initial efforts on air quality last year by the legislature had there not been a hue and cry from the constituents. So please, contact folks. Let them know what you think is important. If you see a policy coming up or a bill coming up that you think is important to you, reach out to them. It will make a difference. And there are lots of advocacy groups you can tap into if you want to sort of join the causes there around air quality or whatever else you feel is most important to you. But it's how we're going to accomplish the changes that all of you and so many of us are involved in. Because the natural resistance, the easiest thing to do as a politician is nothing. It's to smile and try to look good if you can, and go out and shake hands with people and do nothing that's controversial. But to accomplish what we want, and I think what I see from people in this room, what folks want for our communities and for the future, standing still should not be an option. And so I want to encourage all of you to get involved. You're welcome to contact me. I promise you we'll not only look at it, but we'll welcome the comments and ideas to help us go forward. But also to contact others who are in positions of influence to change the policies and the priorities and how we spend money at the governmental level, or things that you can do within your organizations privately or your businesses that will make the change to help us achieve the quality of life that we want for both our future but for our kids' future. So thank you so much for this award. It's enormously meaningful to me.